You don't hate criticism. You hate being wrong. That's ego. You don't resist advice. You resist the feeling of being exposed. That quiet discomfort when someone points out your mistake does not wound your ability. It wounds your identity. And you protect that identity faster than you protect your potential. Stay with me, because this habit is limiting your growth in ways you barely notice. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is subtle, and it repeats daily. Protecting your ego does not look like weakness on the surface. It looks normal. It looks like you explaining why something wasn't your fault. It looks like shifting responsibility to timing, to circumstances, to other people. It looks like refusing feedback while pretending to accept it. You nod politely, but inside you are building a defense. It looks like correcting people mid-sentence. It looks like reacting instead of listening. It looks like protecting your image more than improving your character. You protect your ego when you avoid accountability. When something fails, you search for external reasons first. You highlight your effort instead of your error. You defend your intentions instead of examining your execution. You say you understand, but you do not adjust. You say you want growth, but you avoid discomfort. You say you want honesty, but you resist truth. None of this feels extreme. It feels reasonable. That is why it is dangerous. Weak men protect their ego because they are insecure. Not obviously insecure, quietly insecure. Your self-image depends on appearing competent. You need to look capable. You need to look strong. When someone challenges you, it threatens that image. The fear is not about failing. The fear is about being seen failing. You fear embarrassment. You fear looking inexperienced. You fear looking small. So you protect. Instantly. Underneath ego is a fragile identity. If your sense of self is built on performance, every correction feels personal. You do not hear feedback as information. You hear it as judgment. You do not separate mistake from identity. If you are wrong about something, you assume you are inadequate. That assumption creates emotional turbulence. And when you lack emotional control, you react defensively. You argue. You justify. You protect pride instead of upgrading skill. Ego blocks self-improvement at the root. Learning requires humility. Growth requires admission. You cannot improve what you refuse to acknowledge. If you deny your weaknesses, they remain untouched. If you ignore your blind spots, they control you quietly. You repeat the same patterns, the same reactions, the same failures. Years pass, and you wonder why progress feels slow. The answer is not talent. It is not opportunity. It is resistance. Ego destroys relationships slowly. When you defend yourself constantly, people stop being honest with you. They stop correcting you. They stop challenging you. Not because you are strong, but because you are unsafe. Conversations become shallow. Trust weakens. You feel respected, but you are actually avoided. Real connection requires openness. Real leadership requires accountability. Without humility, your influence becomes fragile. Ego feels powerful in the moment. It gives you a quick sense of control. You win the argument. You protect your status. You maintain your image. But that victory is temporary. Ego feels strong. Pause. But it keeps you weak. Because while you are defending your pride, someone else is refining their skill. While you are protecting your image, someone else is correcting their flaws. Humility is not self-rejection. It is self-awareness. Strong men accept being wrong without collapsing. They do not enjoy correction, but they value it. They do not rush to defend themselves. They listen fully. They separate identity from behavior. A mistake is something you made. It is not something you are. That distinction creates emotional stability. And emotional stability creates long-term strength. When you are humble, criticism becomes data, not an attack. Feedback becomes direction, not humiliation. You ask better questions. You reflect instead of react. You focus on improvement instead of impression. This is maturity. It is quiet. It is controlled. It does not seek validation. It seeks accuracy. Strong men would rather look imperfect and grow than look perfect and stagnate. Ego protects feelings. Discipline protects your future. Ego reacts. Strength responds. Ego talks. Growth listens. Ego needs to win the moment. Discipline wants to win the decade. Ego protects your reputation. Discipline builds your character. One is loud and immediate. The other is quiet and strategic. If you want long-term strength, you cannot let short-term pride guide your behavior. Mental strength is trained through uncomfortable honesty. When criticism comes, you breathe before speaking. You allow silence. You listen to understand, not to reply. You ask yourself what part of the feedback might be true, even if delivery was imperfect, even if tone was harsh. You search for principle instead of flaw. You extract value instead of defending emotion. You take responsibility quickly, not because you are weak, but because you are secure. Accountability is not submission, it is control. When you say I made that mistake, you take ownership of the outcome. Ownership gives you power to change it. Blame gives that power away. The more excuses you make, the less influence you have over your own progress. Emotional intelligence becomes your advantage. Instead of escalating conflict, you regulate yourself. Instead of arguing to win, you communicate to solve. You observe your triggers. You question your assumptions. You monitor your tone. You discipline your reactions. Inner power becomes stronger than public image. You care less about looking competent and more about becoming competent. Over time, your identity shifts. You stop defending everything. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You listen more than you speak. You adjust without drama. You admit error without collapse. Pride slowly loses control over your decisions. You measure progress by growth, not by applause. Your confidence becomes quieter and far more stable. This is personal evolution. You move from reactive to reflective, from defensive to disciplined. From image-focused to truth-focused. You understand that correction is refinement, that discomfort is training, that humility is leverage. You stop fearing exposure because you no longer rely on illusion. Your strength is real, tested, developed, earned. Your pride is loud. Pause. Your discipline should be louder. Ego seeks comfort. Growth seeks correction. Ego clings to certainty. Wisdom tolerates uncertainty. Ego avoids embarrassment. Strength accepts temporary discomfort for permanent development. The rule becomes simple. Truth over ego. Growth over pride. Responsibility over excuses. Correction over comfort. Evolution over image. From now on, you do not protect your ego, you protect your standards. When you feel defensive, you pause. When you feel criticized, you listen. When you fail, you analyze. When you succeed, you remain grounded. You detach your worth from performance. You attach your identity to improvement. That is long-term strength. That is disciplined maturity. You do not need to win every conversation. You need to win your habits. You do not need to look powerful. You need to become accountable. Because the strongest version of you is not the one who argues best. It is the one who grows fastest. Growth will always cost you your comfort. It will cost you the pleasure of being right. It will cost you the illusion of superiority. But what it gives back is far greater. Clarity, control, competence. When you stop defending your ego, you free mental energy. Energy that was once wasted on arguments becomes fuel for improvement. Energy that was once spent protecting pride becomes focus for practice. You begin to see your weaknesses clearly, and instead of hiding them, you train them. This is where real confidence is built. Not from being praised, but from being corrected and adjusting. Not from winning debates, but from mastering yourself. Silence. The disciplined version of you does not panic when exposed. He observes, he evaluates, he improves. He understands that embarrassment is temporary, but skill is permanent. He understands that discomfort is a teacher, not an enemy. You cannot evolve while protecting a fragile identity. You evolve by strengthening your foundation, by telling the truth, by accepting responsibility without being forced, by choosing reflection over reaction. And one day, you will notice something different. Criticism no longer shakes you. Correction no longer threatens you. Silence no longer feels like defeat. Because you are no longer protecting an ego, you are building a standard. Quietly, deliberately, relentlessly. Comment no ego if you choose growth over pride. Type accountable if you are ready to evolve.